Joining us now is veteran news correspondent Ray Suarez, co-host of New York Now and World Affairs. Ray, thanks for being with us.
Great to be here.
You know, we saw the president give that dramatic reading of Sondland's testimony. He views it as an exoneration of any impeachable offenses. How is that strategy working?
Well, that remains to be seen, but let's remember that Donald Trump says a great many things about a great many things, often contradictory, internally contradictory, so that he'll contradict himself a week from now. If you take today's Sondland testimony in series, with that of Volker, with that of Yovanovitch, with that of Taylor, the consistencies across all the stories are problematic for Republicans, and one less covered aspect of today's testimony can't be forgotten. Gordon Sondland said today that he was convinced that the president and Rudolph Giuliani and everyone pushing for this Zelensky announcement didn't really care if the Ukrainians actually investigated. They weren't looking for an actual investigation. They were looking for a damaging announcement of an investigation, meaning that this was a pure political play and had nothing to do with corruption in Ukraine.
Ray, speaking of politics, you've covered Washington politics for a long time. How effective do you believe these public hearings are, or do you think we potentially will see impeachment fatigue as voters head to the voting booth in 2020?
Well, certainly there's an interest in dragging these things out in the hopes that the public will lose its attention span, start to get agitated and impatient. That's certainly in the interest of people who think that this is really not a good investigation and not a fair investigation. If more comes down the pike as damaging as today was, who knows? The public's mood may change.
It's hard to imagine all this impeachment talk doesn't factor into tonight's debate. Do you think we're going to see or hear a replay of today's hearings tonight in Atlanta?
If tonight's Democratic presidential candidates are asked about the national parks, about clean water, or about airport congestion, they should answer with answers about the impeachment hearings. So many of these debates have gotten tied up in endless talk of Medicaid for all, Medicare for all, about health care plans and insurance companies. That's not where today's news is. I'll be interested to see if tonight's moderators switch gears, change strategies, and make at least a big chunk of tonight's debate about the impeachment hearings.
Ray, between recent polling, especially in Iowa and in South Carolina, where you have Biden leading one and Budaj leading the other, there's no real clear frontrunner. Do you think we'll see one emerge tonight?
No, and everybody should just get off of that. It's weeks until anybody votes in any way that counts for anything. The lead's going to change, who's up is going to change, who's getting a lot of attention is going to change, just as it does every cycle. Ask President Howard Dean, ask President Rudolph Giuliani. The lead is always in motion.
Got a good point.
I have to ask you about this interview in Rolling Stone with Mayor Pete Buttigieg. He called out Republicans for, quote, hypocrisy, citing conservative stances on immigration and traditional marriage. Does that strategy play well to Democrats, or does it hurt his chances of peeling off maybe some moderate Christians?
You know, about 2/3 of Democrats say they have a faith affiliation of some kind. The idea that talking about personal faith and how it informs public life is anathema for Democrats is a myth. It's always been a myth. Mayor Pete, so far, is doing well with this strategy, and it's a reminder that there's many ways to approach the Gospels and many ways to approach Christianity in the public sphere.
Ray Suarez, thank you.
Good to see you both.